namely, this is when, let's say, almost half century ago, 40 years ago, more or less, we started to abandon the idea of workforce as a cost, so human resource as a cost, and we connected human resource and workforce as an asset. Indeed, today considered that it's considered the most important asset. This wasn't the case 40 years ago, where cutting cost was the main, and managing people in strict sense of the term was the main aim of organization and personnel management. So reward management is strictly connected with this evolution and with the rise of strategic human resource management, but it's kind of a paradox that the integration of reward management within human resource management practices came with a certain degree of delay. We see that today many organizations are still struggling in integrating reward management and the concept deriving from the evolution of reward management within human resource practices and business practices at a certain degree. We will look at, essentially, in the webinar will be composed by two main parts, part one and part two. In part one, we will discuss and we will look at how reward management is composed. So the main elements of reward management, generally speaking, and the principal aspects of reward management. In the second part, we will dive into a very engaging matter, which is the strategic side of reward management, so strategic reward strategy and total reward, this important fundamental concept characterizing strategies in reward management matter. So we will look at the concept of total reward. We will try to understand, to interpret, to give a meaning to this important concept today, very, very relevant within human resource practices. I would like to break the ice by asking you something, an introductory question or point of view about reward management and the way organization, what reward management stands for, what reward is. We will look at it soon. But before starting sharing with you a few slides and walking you through these concepts, have you ever felt or somehow considered the impact of reward on your own choices, for instance, as an employee, as a manager, or considering your choice under the employment point of view? So, for instance, what does drive you toward in considering a job offer better than another? Let's make a parallel. Have you ever heard of, for instance, the world of sport, footballer or in other sports? Have you ever considered or have you ever heard of champions, athletes? They make decisions not only based on how much a club is willing to pay them. Many times, especially successful people, successful manager, top leader, CEOs, or wise athlete, they refuse, they decline even important and higher offers under the economic point of view, extrinsic point of view, in order to accept other roles in other organization or other contract for work playing for other clubs. Have you ever heard something like this? Is this something that you ever came somehow across? So what's the reason why sometimes, you know, money is not only is not the main driver, you know, is for sure is one of the most important component within an offer, and is one of the principal for sure motivator, but evidently is not the only motivator. And dynamics in the business landscape and even in our private life, for instance, in applying for jobs or in accepting a job offer. Let's say you go through a successful recruitment and selection process for both a well-known successful company like, I don't know, Google, or brand that you really like, or I don't know, Lamborghini, or rather than a company that own the headquarter in central London, in a beautiful or in Canary Wharf, you know, one of the big four, and Ernst & Young, Deloitte. And another company that maybe offer you a better salary, but is a very small organization you never heard of, really. You were attracted by the job offer, you are looking for jobs, so you apply more or less for every job you feel be suitable for, or attract you for the pay level. So is there anything attracting you toward the job, the offer of a more successful company, even though they may pay a bit less? What do you think? They may be driver pushing people accepting even less money in order to work for or to play for a well-known company or organization, or money is what really drives you, or generally what do you think drives people in making this kind of decision? Quasi, welcome to the webinar. Good to see you. How are you doing? So, guys, what do you think? What's your point of view about this? Shreya, Corey, would you like to share your point of view regarding the attraction of money and attraction of other feature, other characteristic? Is money everything when it's about attracting people? Or there are other aspects, for instance, that may be relevant in attracting people for working or play for a certain club. What do you think? Akash?
Hello.
Yes, Shreya.
Sir, what I think is money can be one of the part where people get attracted, but also the thing is people more get attracted towards the brand also. Like
Right.
everybody is getting brand conscious and they move towards a brand other than like a little local company if they try to apply for job.
Yep.
Even if they are at a beginner level also, they think of some high level goals or, some high profile companies is what I feel.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this. Indeed, it is in many cases. This is the case. In many cases, you know, assuming that people have a choice, of course, you know. In many cases, there are other factors. For instance, brands now they exercise a strong. They act as a big magnet of talent, big magnet of attraction. You know, so there is something more. So let's go through our material. Let's share a bit of slide. I will share my screen with you. Okay, can you all see the screen? I hope so.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, let me position you. Perfect. Okay, as mentioned, we are going to discuss about reward in terms of how reward is, what reward is, and how reward is composed. And in the second part, we will discuss of strategic reward and total reward, that are different things from reward, generally speaking. So first question, what is reward? There is no one definition, like the majority of human research function or related activities. There is no one definition of reward, but generally speaking, we mean all financial aspects made to employees. These include cash and benefit, and these are the main component, the main of the word reward. So what we mean as a reward, the cash and benefits, we will see also the classification of benefits based on the nature, made to all employees. Other terms are used in order to define reward, like compensation or remuneration, especially this is especially a cultural aspect. For instance, in the US, is very common referring to compensation more than reward. In the UK and Europe, generally speaking, reward it's more common as a term, but they are used interchangeable as interchangeable terms. So, what does constitute reward at a basic level? The actual pay made to employee can be divided into two categories, two elements, which are the fixed or base pay and the variable pay. The base or fixed part is represented by wage or salary given in exchange of a certain quantity of work, which is contracted on a time-based period. For instance, let's say a 37 hours week contract. This part of the employee's pay can also include other provided and guaranteed payments. So the fixed part, for instance, location allowance, imagining people, for instance, people working here in London, they often benefit of a fixed part of the pay, which is an allowance. So it depends on where they are located. For instance, London, considering the cost of life and everything, people earn up to an average of 20% more than in the rest of England. So variable pay instead is part of the salary that is not guaranteed. So that's why it's variable. It is often represented by bonus, incentives, overtime, so the extra hours that people casually, occasionally, or with a certain frequency perform, but they are not part of the contract in terms of salary. They are a variable part of the earning of the employee. So these are the two main elements of an employee pay. Yeah, but how do companies determine how to the way and the quantity of the reward? Generally speaking, we are not yet within the strategic point of view, under the strategic point of view. Rather, we are just discussing of the structural side of the reward. So let's break down the employee's reward composition, also in relation to what is the employee life cycle. Therefore, we will briefly outline a few components of the reward management, namely pay structure, pay levels, pay progression, and of course variable pay. So these would be the main component of reward management that we will discuss in talking about the general approach in reward management and its main component. Regarding pay structure, let's say that pay structures provides a basis for measuring the value of jobs. So through the pay structures, we have an evaluation of jobs and how jobs relate each other within the same organization. So this is the pay structures of the organization, how jobs relate each other in terms of valuing the jobs according to the organization. We are talking about internal evaluation. And also the pay structures is something that may relate to the labor market. So how the pay structure of an organization relate with labor market price of work. Let's use this expression. Pay structure are also defined in order to allow the integration of additional elements on top of the fixed pay rates. For example, the very form of existing allowances or bonuses, as mentioned. Regarding pay level, instead, is the way organization set pay level for an array of jobs, and these vary. The most common and useful tool in pay level within organization is a job evaluation. But establishing pay level is often function of other elements. For instance, industry, sector within which company competes in. For instance, in the private sector, let's say, the labor market is more impacting, is more influential on the pay level than public sector, when instead public sector is much more influenced by job evaluation, regardless the job market. This is at least traditionally. And another way to define pay level is by using labor market rates as a reference, which implies a certain degree of dynamism. And as I mentioned, is much more common benchmarking, especially when it's about key role within organization, benchmarking the leader, for instance, or the most attractive organization, those attracting talents. This is in order to compete with talent. So I know that if I put my salary below my competitors, especially when these competitors have a sort of higher degree of attraction, as we mentioned earlier, thanks to Shreya, how can I hope to attracting people, especially if I am a less famous, less successful organization? So therefore, labor market rates are much more influential in terms of pay level than in the private sector rather than in the public sector. Regarding pay progression, instead, pay progression commonly employees' reward is tied with performance, skills, or other factors determining the employee moving along the so-called bands or ranges. So company, they usually have spines or bands or ranges of pay for single jobs. So jobs, have you ever saw advert or came across description like from 25 to 30,000 pounds a year, depending on experience, depending on this, depending on that. So pay progression is usually organization utilize a mix of factors to determine progression of employees within bands or ranges. Again, industry, nature of the company, sector, they are all factor influencing the progression of employees in terms of salary. Whilst within the private sector is particularly influential the assessment of individual achievements, for instance, in determining the position of the pay of the individual within the bands, or in order to progress according to range. In public sector, things are slightly different. Despite the public sector is becoming over time much more similar to the private sector, but still, advancement and progression are frequently determined by, for instance, seniority, which is a particular aspect for us HR manager. Promotion for seniority reason, because can gives room for discrimination, age-related discrimination. So it's a very hot topic, especially nowadays. Therefore, another aspect distinguishing private from public sector in terms of pay progression is that tendentially, whilst in the private sector, employees are usually in average in the middle of a given bands or given range. In public sector, what is noticed is that employees are at the top level of the bands, top level of ranges, whilst in the private sector, they usually the average of pay positioning of pay level within the bands is roughly in the middle. So if company pays a job between 25 and 30, the usual pay of employee is roughly 27 pound 500. So this is the 27,500 pounds. This is the what the practice says, what statistics says. Variable pay. This is by far the components that introduces us to the core of this webinar, so the strategic and total reward. So variable pay usually comes in form of bonuses or incentives. Variable pay is widely adopted for both fostering nurturing the future performance, so as a motivator for future performance of the employees, and in order to in this case we are talking about incentives, or to price past performance of employees, and this usually occurs to bonuses. So these are the two main reasons why bonuses and incentives take place and are allocated within the workforce. One is to push people to perform, and another is to praise them. They are also used in combination. You know, they are not mutually exclusive. However, once again, sector, in industry, nature of company, so they are all determinants. They act all as a you know, determinants. They play an important role in terms of combination of fixed and variable pay and especially the extent of the variable pay within the total earning of employee. In private sector, for instance, this is more common than in public sector and sector like financial, retail. The use of bonuses and incentives is a characteristic. It's so embedded in the practice that is given for granted. You know, the presence of bonuses and incentives, even largely in a large extent in comparison with the basic base or fixed pay. In terms of variable pay, seniority, and kind of role also play an important role, since organization usually they set a specific specific arrangements for certain roles, for instance, senior managerial position, or especially for executives. Imagine CEO and bonuses for the CEOs of organizations, usually very high, and substantial bonuses, also objects of regulation and interests of media, as we will see later. Within organization adopting performance-related reward at individual level, performance-related schemes are often individual bonuses and commission based on sales, particularly as said in financial and retail sector. Instead, at team level, organizations often use profit share or gain sharing. So these are two common practices in order to price or in order to motivate employee. Companies are, especially in the private sector, particularly attracted by the use of variable pay for many reasons. First, because of this kind of reward practice allows company to pay only when company reach the desired result. So only when company has a reason to pay employees in terms of reaching a threshold of profit, so they pay when there is a concrete reason for the company to pay, not when the company is unsuccessful or does not meet its own target, especially in terms of profitability. The other reason is that generally these kind of bonuses and incentives, generally, they do not carry additional costs, like instead pension and contribution or extra hours do. So this is another reason why variable pay is kind of attractive for organizations. In pay policies and practices, employers must meet legal requirements, as you know or can imagine. So paying people in country, of course, every country has got its own regulation, policies, guidances. Employers generally must meet legal requirements as well as reporting duties, for instance. This kind of requirements vary according to the kind or size of the organization. Among these requirements, we are talking about the UK, equal pay, national minimum wage, as well as reporting on organizations, gender pay gap. Now there is a sort of, push toward ethnic pay gap, and is kind of to be, it is assessed at regulatory level, and probably there will be news in terms of ethnic pay gap. For now, gender pay gap for organization with more than 250 employees, for instance, they have the duty of publishing the gender pay gap and executive pay ratio, how much the executive earn compared with the average of employee. The national minimum wage applies to all workers aged 16 and over. It classifies 4 categories: So we are talking about apprentices, workers aged under 18, those between 18 and 20, and those between 21 and 24. National living wage applies to those aged 25 or over, so they are kind of structured categories that organizations are aware of. Regarding equal pay, this refers to sex discrimination, establishing the right for men and women to be paid the same for the same or equivalent work. However, it must be said that despite the legislation enforcing this principle, there are still significant gender pay differences, and this is also kind of an accountancy of human resource management, since many of the issues related to gender pay gap are particularly due to care commitments of women and reflection on their career. Often the women's career is interrupted by having children, for instance, and this is one of the main reasons why they often give up, and it's difficult for, especially going back to business at the same level, especially if organization they don't have specific policies and programs in order to welcome women coming back from care commitments of medium and long term. Large employers, as we said, they are required to report annually the gender pay gap. Generally speaking, people, professionals, you in your activity as HR need to be aware of the regulatory background and corporate governance standards adopted by single organization when setting rewards for all level of employee, including, it must be taken in consideration, especially requirement for large listed UK businesses to publish and explaining rationale of and gaps in gender, or the mentioned executive pay ratio. The executive pay ratios probably is from 2020. It must be said, before we mentioned the composition of fixed pay, base pay, and benefit, it must be said that the regulation also intervenes in order to regulate, in order to state and establishing some benefits. Indeed, some benefits are mandatory. Despite you can easily come across job offer in which employer they state, for instance, 20 day pay leave, which are mandatory requirements for organization, and they put this as a benefit in order, to boast something that instead it derives from the regulation. So pension scheme, for instance, this kind of for employees contribution, they are benefit but mandatorily regulated by law. We saw something about the national living wage. These are all strictly administrative stuff, but we must be aware of. Regarding benefits, a wide range of benefits are offered from employers. So this is a field that is getting really kind of vast. So we have from traditional benefits that, as mentioned, are mostly the mandatory ones, such as paid leave or occupational pensions and so on. But the list of new benefits created by the organization is countless, from, just to give some example, cycle to work scheme, or paid leave to adopt a pet, gym, or any kind of discounts and membership, or even recently, it was, I think, for probably less than 1 year ago, not more, slightly more than 1 year ago, there was a case of company in the UK offering hangover sick leave. So employees are allowed to call sick for hangover, of course, in a limited number. There was also a case in, I think, in Germany, of a court that stated the hangover, established that the hangover is a reason for employee to go sick. But anyway, it was a kind of controversial decision also, because it is kind of legitimation of the abuse of alcohol. So this was really something that was appearing as a controversial, as a benefit. But anyway, it's just to show how this field is kind of, you know, evolving, pushing organization in creating a new series of benefits, reflecting somehow the societal and businesses, instances, trends. Again, in terms of benefits, organizations offer benefits in different ways. So, for instance, they may be flexible benefit schemes, also known as a cafeteria benefits. Have you ever heard of cafeteria benefits? What does this mean? Or flex plans? Cafeteria benefits essentially allows employees to tailor their benefit package according to their own needs. So it's in order to capture as much as possible the employees' needs through benefits, you know, because it's difficult, especially for large organizations, it's difficult to identify the kind of benefit the workforce may desire, because you may risk to please part of the organization, but maybe a part of the organization more or less relevant that may not be interested in those kind of benefits. So therefore, cafeteria benefit allow somehow to please the wider workforce. So at least this is the aim of establishing benefit, offering benefits in such a flexible way. But now that we have a basic understanding of reward and its main elements and practices within the workplace, let's dive into the crucial point of this webinar, that is having an understanding of how and why reward became such a sensitive matter in HR practices. We saw that companies put their effort in offering benefits, even creating, you know, controversial benefits. In order to do what? This is in order to differentiate themselves from competitors based on the way they reward employees. So let's say, let's clarify one thing. In the practice, it must be said that statistically, the way companies pay employees is the same on average. So doing a bit of maths about benefits or pay, base fixed pay, more or less company within the same sector, within the same industry, competitor of the same size, they pay employees the same on average. What is different is the way company pay employees. But why? This is because reward is a motivating factor. We go back to the beginning of our discussion, our webinar, when we outline the parallel between the evolution of human resource management and human resource management strategy and reward. So reward is a motivating factor, now more important than ever, because of the emergency of new societal instances. And it allows organization to shape the workforce behavior. So it allows the organization to communicate its value, and therefore acting as a attraction for people in terms of values, in terms of principles. I would say let's watch an interview of released by who is considered the father of the most adopted HR model within the business landscape, HR model that is even called with his own name. So let's have a look at this interview a few years ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago. This is Dave Ulrich. I think everybody working, at least working or studying in HR knows. Let's see what he says about reward. Just 1 second, let's the video downloading. Let me check my connection. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Dave Ulrich. I'm a professor of business at the Ross School of Business and a partner in the RBL Group. We're trying to figure out, what does HR do to win? We've said you got to turn strategy, where we're going, into individual action through the management and navigation of paradox. There are 3 strategic enablers: culture and change, making things happen and changing; human capital curator, and the other one is total rewards. You know, it's really fun. We've been looking at the mix of HR practices for 20 years. One of the most fascinating things we did is we looked at the clusters of activities within the HR function. What are all the practices in HR? One of the studies we did a couple of years ago, we looked at that grouping by HR people and by line managers. HR people separated talent management, now human capital curator, and rewards as separate issues. Line managers saw them as the same. By the way, that's an interesting insight. The total reward steward and managing compensation and well-being really has to connect to human capital development. But in our research, we see those as separate. Human capital development is, how do we get the right people into the company, through the company, and if appropriate, out of the company. Total rewards is, what do we do with the people when they're in the company? Can we create a reward system that builds positive accountability? In fact, one of the hot areas in HR, should we do away with performance management? In fact, a number of years ago, students at the University of Michigan in the MBA program said, we hate performance management, we hate grades because they force differentiation, let's not do grades. We had a small committee meet, they came back and they said, we have a solution, we're gonna have no more grades. Here's what we're gonna have: pass, high pass, and low pass. By the way, here's what we discovered. That's called grades. It's called A, B, and C. You've got to have accountability. There's got to be a reward system. There's got to be a consequence. Without a consequence, people don't do work well. Almost nobody washes their car or their rent-a-car before they turn it in, because there's no consequence. That's silly. But most of us fill it up with gas. So in this domain of rewards, we see 2 things that I think are marvelous and fascinating. One is compensation and benefits. We get that. How do we manage the economic well-being of our employees? Do we give them fair pay for fair work? Does our compensation system based on equity, performance, and driving the right set of issues? Are people paid fairly? But here's what we also found. People want to find in work meaning. the non-financials. So what we found is, in building a reward system, we need the compensation. We need the financials, but we also need the meaning and well-being. Wendy Ulrich, my wife, and I did a book a few years ago called The Why of Work. Here's what we've discovered. Compensation is threshold. You need to pay fairly and appropriately, but to really drive rewards, it's well-being and purpose. My commitment at the University of Michigan is not my salary. By the way, I hope this isn't seen by the dean and others who now cut my salary. But my commitment to the University of Michigan is the meaning and passion I get from working with great students, working with great colleagues, working with great administrators. That's the meaningfulness that HR should bring to the job. How do employees figure out why they're working and find that meaning in the work? When meaning and compensation work together, we have a total reward steward. We have a package that helps people be successful.
Okay. So, we had Dave Ulrich say, my commitment at the University of Michigan is not my salary. So this is a sentence I would like you reflect on. What emerges in reward management is nowadays is a departure of this activity simply considered as an administrative task. Instead, reward management is becoming more and more considered a strategic activity in order to promote and to achieve what are considered a series of advantages for organizations. A series of advantages ranging from higher level of competitivity of the organization in dealing with the rivalry in a given industry, acquisition of talent, so recruitment, and retention. So the use of reward as a strategic component, strategic tool in order to achieve a list of advantages. This is few examples. It's really today a crucial matter in human resource management. Whilst pay and benefits are important, and getting them wrong can have adverse consequences also under the legal point of view, as we saw. They are not the only factors that employers should consider in rewarding the workforce. Over time, the non-financial side of the reward gained a central, a vital role within strategic human resource management practices. And these involve a long list of activities and initiatives that makes up the non-financial facet of reward. So this is what is today absolutely relevant, absolutely more relevant within the organization. The non-financial side of reward, the so-called intrinsic reward. Among these elements that compose the non-financial side of reward, there are activities, initiatives, and factors like performance management, career development, flexible working arrangement, employee voice within processes and organizational policies, well-being, employer branding, recognition of the employee and their performance, total reward practices. So can you see the amount of topics in HR-related initiatives are recalled and compose the concept of non-financial reward, what acts as we heard in the previous interview as a strong driver for employee, not only in terms of attraction, but in motivation to perform and reason to remain within the organization. They are all elements, all topics that we discussed in the previous, in our previous webinars. As you can see, they are all related to each other. And as mentioned in the previous webinar on Monday, particularly related with performance management. Yes, we discussed a lot about it, and we also had within the interview, people hating, performance management, and that's it. As long as we, do not transform performance management in a supportive tool instead of a oppressive and controlling tool, people will continue, our employees will continue to hate performance management, and I couldn't agree more with them. So we will discuss of strategic reward and total reward during the second part of our webinar. And for now, let's go through a exchange of opinion and point of view about what we saw so far. And I would like to hear from you before a quick break of a few minutes. And what do you think about? What do you think about the interview we just heard and the relevance nowadays of non-financial reward within the reward management practices in terms of attraction? How do you think this kind of component of reward, do you feel they are part of the reward, first of all, or you see only money, the salary? This is the job, this is the salary at the end of the month, that's it. So this is what I'm looking for in a employee relation, employee life cycle, and what is outside pay and benefit, strictly speaking, benefit is no part of the reward. What's your opinion about this? Yes, sir. What's your opinion about non-financial reward? How do you think these impact on employees nowadays? Have you some thought about Quasi share your opinion? Quasi,
Hello.
Quasi.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Perfectly.
Okay.
Please, go ahead.
Good. Yeah, what I want to say is that most of the time it depends on the level of the employee and the entry point. Normally, it's the financial reward that attracts them first. I'm talking from the public sector. The public sector, normally the financial reward that attracts them first into the system. A fresh graduate who is coming will look at the financial reward first. And mostly when they join and they start progressing, then they start looking at the other non-financial rewards. Then they start looking at career development most of the time. By the financial reward that attracts them, they come into the organization after 2-3 years, then they will look back and start looking at career development. After 5 years, where am I going from here? After 3 years, where am I going from here? And this is what so we can't ignore the financial reward as a motivating factor. It's a motivating factor. And the non-financial rewards come in when people get to the higher level, the managerial level. Once they get to the managerial level, then the financial aspect doesn't come in a lot. They look at the non-financial. Then they are looking at the other aspect. They are not thinking about leisure time, working hours, flexible working hours. That is what the managers start thinking about. But the fresh graduate who enter the system will not think about flexible working hours. He wants to work. He wants the money. So that's the difference. That's the difference between the financial and non-financial. That's what I think.
I think thank you first of all for sharing this with us. And I under the statistical point of view, I couldn't agree more with you, Quasi. And it's always, as you remember earlier, I shared with you some data saying that whilst in the private sector, in terms of pay level, employees are paid in average in the middle of the range. In
Yes.
prime public sector, people are paid much above, at the end of the band. And this proves what you said, that people are attracted by money for working for public sector, because public sector is notoriously less attractive than private sector. In public sector, there are no brands. You don't work for Ferrari, you don't work for Amazon, you don't work for. So definitely, I really can't agree more with you. And you also kind of introduced a connection when you said something really inspiring in terms, and is a beautiful, interesting perspective. When you said people start to look at other kind of non-financial reward and stuff only when they reach a certain level of seniority, which I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, a certain level of earning, of money. So it's like a kind of recalling the famous Maslow pyramid, whereby people, once people satisfy the basic level, at that point they start to satisfy needs, positioned, hierarchically positioned above the base. And I agree with you, but for sure people, and not only me, you know, I'm academically speaking, and professionally speaking, I can only give my really modest point of view. But what you said is also reflected by many strong and authoritative academic source, which is, yes, okay, no financial reward and everything else, but this doesn't mean, because if you touch the financial side, and if the financial side does not reflect the employees or generally speaking applicants' needs, you do not attract people, because the financial side, the money, is still the main means. So it's still the main motivator factor. Also recalling, we are kind of connecting theories all together. hygiene factor, for instance. So something that the theory about, hygiene factor and no hygiene factor. So kind of, if the pay level is that one, people are satisfied. This doesn't motivate, but if he decrease, he creates the motivation. So definitely, very interesting point of view, especially, the fact that which kind of people are more interested in non-financial. Are we all interested in the same way toward non-financial reward? So things that can make a difference in terms of attraction, motivation in performing, and retention of people employed. And you know what's the beautiful thing of this and our discussion, Kwasi? That in HR, really, if there is something that I can, supporting with the maximum of emphasis, is that there is no right and wrong, there is no kind of black and white situation, but everything comes from integration of many approaches, situational judgment with best practice. And what you just said is something that stimulates an HR professional in thinking as HR professional. So this is the way in which HR professionals should think, not about, okay, what does motivate me, so is what motivates other people. But in proposing this kind of ultra-tailored HR initiatives, for instance, getting data about how, and the way people are motivated, and you can create a blend of motivating factor and reward strategy, whereby you can increase the pay level. The amount of money, we said earlier that company basically pay the same. This means that either I pay you £25,000 a year, either I pay you £24,000 a year, but I give you gym, bicycle and stuff, I'm paying you the same. He changed the way I pay you, but you know, at the end of the day, I'm paying you the same. But this attracts people in a different way. So what you just said, which is an interesting and absolutely agreeable perspective, it may stimulate organization and HR in creating a tailored, which is one of the secret of reward management, reward strategy and total reward strategy. According to what? According to your workforce, according to your HR planning, according to, if for instance, let's speak about the generational aspect of the workforce. You may deal with a workforce aged or young, more or less young, and they may be attracted by two different things. Maybe older employees may be attracted simply by money. They are not attracted by brand, by cycling work scheme and stuff. And this is exactly the right approach in human resource management. So be situational based. So thank you very much for sharing this. Thank you, Kwasi. Thank you, very interesting perspective. So is there any other that want to share something about what we discussed so far? Is there any other perspective, experience, or would you like to clarify something that we discussed? If not, I would suggest to just have simply have a little break of 5 minutes, if you agree with me, and we will be back within 5 minutes in dive into the core aspect of our webinars, strategic approach in rewarding employee and total reward, this important and new, let's say, new concept in rewarding people. So thank you. See you soon within 5 minutes. Here in London is 6:08. So 5-minute break, and we will resume this soon. Bye. Thank you. Okay. Here we are. Are you okay? Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Great, guys. So let's go through the second part of our webinar. Let me share the screen with you. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Can you all see the screen? Can you give me
Yes.
kind confirmation? Perfect,
Yes.
perfect.
There's a party, but we cannot join.
Corey, can you see the screen?
And I was just joking. There's a party that we cannot join, so we can.
Sorry, there's a part that I can see. Yeah, this I think is a Christmas party.
Okay.
So financial and non-financial reward. That was an example of non-financial reward. The Christmas dinner that many organizations, at least here in London, in the UK, used to offer as a element to promote cohesion among employees. Anyway, so we will discuss now about strategic reward, and strategic reward is essentially a long-term approach representing how an organization's reward strategy and practice support the strategic objectives and needs of the organization together with needs of the employees. So this is strategic reward, supporting business strategy and objectives and employees' needs, not only business strategy and objectives. The concept of total reward, instead, is considerable part of strategic reward. And it's linked with the one of strategic reward in covering both tangible and the mentioned intangible aspects that are considered sensitive for employee and for, generally speaking, working experience of people within an organization. Again, the concept of total reward should be part of the overall reward strategy. We will soon look at the significant factors in designing and implementing a reward strategy together with principles to consider in doing so. We will also look at features of total reward, the different approaches and pros and cons in total reward practices. So let's start with strategic reward and how to develop a reward strategy. Underlining that when we talk about reward strategy, we are talking about reward management aimed to support, so there is strong, strict connection and alignment with business strategy and its goals and employees' needs. Content of reward strategy, when we develop a reward strategy, probably the first aspect we should consider in developing a reward strategy. So there are no rigid prescriptions about what a reward strategy must contain and organization should design in terms of how to formulate the reward strategy, because the way organizations formulate the reward strategy when they do so, of course, is different, and it may occur in different way, as well as adopting formal or informal approaches. However, a reward strategy is typically structured in a way that include, first, statement similar to organization mission statement, a statement depicting the proposed reward developments. So a proposal statement, a rationale setting out the business case that justifies the reward proposal. So we need to, consider that these are aspects that, regardless in which form or shape the reward strategy takes place, this aspect should characterize a reward strategy and strategic reward, generally speaking. Namely, a strong business case supporting the reason why, the rationale justifying our reward strategy proposal. The guiding principles as a framework of the reward strategy. And lastly, the action plan to implement the strategy that we formulated. And as we see, this would be probably the most delicate side, the aspect within which the companies struggle the most. So these are essentially content of reward strategy that somehow characterize any reward strategy, assuming and recognizing that reward strategy can assume, can get different shapes within organization. Despite now there are a couple of things I extracted from the main components of a reward strategy. Principles in reward strategy is one of them, and this is of particularly importance because despite the difference in approaches adopted from organizations to formulate their reward management under the strategic point of view, a relevant principle should always inform the reward strategy. And among these principles, there are, first of all, the alignment of pay structures and pay progression within kind of, let's say, superordinate goals. So pay structures and pay progression that we outlined in the beginning. A reward strategy must ensure that pay structures and pay progression are aligned with values, behavior, performance desired by the business at strategic level. For example, linking pay progression with specific types of performance. By the way, performance in meaning also behavioral and learning performance. So this is one of the way, for example, of promoting the desired by the organization kind of performance. Proportionality between fixed pay and variable pay. Why? It is important. This is an important principle, especially in a specific sector like those mentioned earlier, financial, retail, sales, generally speaking. Managing the extent of variable pay against the fixed pay carefully in consideration to the impact of this proportion on employees' behavior. This is due because of the needs of encouraging appropriate behavior and performances as well. It is, notorious that this is a relevant matter in organization and department, whereby performance-related pay is, for instance, sales-driven, meaning taking into consideration corporate governance standards, risks, ethics, trusts, because incentives and bonuses may notoriously push people toward unethical, risky behavior. So it is important when we formulate our reward strategy that we take into consideration the proportionality of fixed pay over variable pay, regardless, legal parameters, existing legal parameters. This is in order not to make the variable aspect of the reward strategy a toxic element rather than a motivating element. Another principle I would like to highlight is to linking pay strategy with key determinants of success. This is highly strategic, namely considering the key contribution of people needed for the business success by linking the reward policy to the labor market in order to ensure competitiveness in recruiting and attracting key people for the organization. This, of course, also requires to consider the internal workforce composition and needs in terms of not to creating attractions. But it's strategically important the identification of key relevant internal stakeholders in order to tailor our strategy. Who are people the company benefit the most? Also, as you can see, this also recall concept and function like succession planning, talent management. This is human resource management, essentially connection of the all functions. There is really in human resource management, it's difficult to think of a function which is not related or connected, that we can implement in isolation. And this kind of highlight this concept. Again, vertical and horizontal integration of what design the strategy requires us to ensure a vertical integration between employee reward and business goal. For instance, developing the mentioned performance-related pay arrangements aimed to increase organization profitability, but at the same time, the strategy must ensure horizontal integration of pay policy with the whole spectrum of HR policies. This means that the strategy should ensure that element like pay progression, pay level, they must reflect the promoted culture and value of the organization, mission of the organization, and last but not least, regulation. So this is vertical and horizontal integration. Again, last but not least, fairness and transparency. This is the key. Guarantee the maximum and perceivable level of transparency and fairness together with monitoring the effectiveness of our reward strategy. But fairness and transparency today for the workforce are really utmost relevant elements. So when people don't perceive fairness in pay matter, it's kind of a trouble. So this is totally really highly affecting for motivation for any kind of strategy would be, even well formulated, designed. If people don't perceive and don't feel there is fairness and transparency within the reward management, it is really affecting, and this is by far an element awkward, to handle for organization, because fairness and transparency requires a strong and structured set of policies, and it's not always it's not easy, especially for in the private sector where we saw organization show tendency to benchmark role and to adapt the recruitment and the pay level to the market. So there are oscillations, a kind of fluctuation. But again, fairness and transparency must inform the reward strategy. Otherwise, it's not going to be to work the reward strategy where there is no fairness and transparency perceived by the workforce. I mentioned earlier that particular attention is needed because of the implementation stage of the reward strategy is a very delicate matter. The formulation of a reward strategy requires essentially designing reward policies that are aimed to support the business strategy and long-term sustainability of organization together with the employees' needs. This is not an easy activity, formulating a reward strategy, but what emerges from the reality is that most challenging phase is to put the design reward policy into practice. And one of the main obstacles is the lack of integration of reward policy with the rest of the HR policy. So this is by far one of the main elements we have to be aware of when we implement our reward strategy. Let's jump into total reward. So total reward and especially its component, or what total reward involves in terms of initiatives and elements. It is not a new concept. So let's say that in 90s there was an important and almost revolutionary book from a couple of consultant American authors. This book was Pay People Right, reward strategy to create great companies, something like this. So we are talking about a concept. There is no, it didn't land on the HR trend, within the HR trend recently. Indeed, as many management trends, also the concept of total reward comes from the USA. The idea stems from the fact that money or intrinsic reward in general isn't the only motivator, as we mentioned from the beginning of this discussion. Therefore, the importance of intangible rewards within the reward strategy as a whole should characterize the work experience of employee. This is what today's organization are focused on. Evidence within business dynamics highlight that the concept of total reward as a substantial and vast workplace implication. I invite you to reflect on this aspect, particularly under the generational point of view. Let's say climate change. What does total reward refers to? What is part of total reward? We will see that total reward involves intangible aspect composing the work experience. For instance, what do you think is the likelihood of a company that has got a bad reputation in terms of pollution in attracting talents from new generation, with all these movement and strong push on, especially from young generation, toward climate change issues? This is exactly what we talk about when we talk when we mention total reward. So the list of components or element characterizing total reward can't be exhaustive, especially in order of importance and impact of these elements on the employees' working experience. This is because the uniqueness of every one of us. This is because human being and the perception of the reality is different. So what motivates me, what is important to me is not important or relevant for some other. So as we discussed earlier. However, studies have highlighted some significant elements characterizing the work experience, the employee's work experience, in addition to the extrinsic pay, so money, financial reward, essentially. And these components are essentially performance and recognition of employees, well-being, organizational culture, development and career opportunities, business strategy, and human resource strategy. They are core component of employees' work experience. As we may notice, there is nothing new in these elements. So, meaning they are all well-known aspects of human resource management and business management, generally speaking. But what is still, what was in the past and is still often missing in organizations is approaching reward management as a strategic activity and exploiting the concept of reward management. In doing so, these activities and these elements, these components or areas must be rationally part of the reward strategy, and they must be treated together rather than in isolation, because this is the main difference in approaching reward strategy considering total reward. It means integrating this activity within our reward strategy: performance recognition, well-being, organizational culture, development and career opportunity, business strategy, and human resource management. Human resource strategy, sorry. They are aspects that should be integrated all together within the reward strategy in order to exploit the concept of total reward. Conversely, a total reward approach places the employee work experience in the middle of the non-financial rewards. So it is kind of highlighted by the fact that employees place great emphasis, especially a certain generation, of employee, as we mentioned, on intangible rewards, especially when it's about deciding which organization work for and in showing the level of commitment in performing in their role. In the beginning, we highlighted with Shreya, for instance, what does attract, working for brands, and then this is part of total reward. It plays a crucial role nowadays in human resource management practices, and it must be considered a kind of fundamental part of our reward management strategy. Of course, as mentioned, the concept of total reward and the elements playing a relevant role in composing the total reward concept and idea varies, and it largely subjective. It is not a case the fact that it emerged cafeteria benefits, for instance, within the HR practice, whereby we discussed earlier, employees are allowed to kind of configure, to tailor the benefit package. However, also in this case, there are elements that HR professional should always consider in implementing a total reward strategy approach. These elements are flexibility of the benefit, as we saw, because of the uniqueness of individuals. Career, personal and professional development. Meaningful work. Do you remind the interview? People want that their job is meaningful. People don't want to do something that has no, meaning. People don't perceive being as important for the organization, for the community, or anything else. Autonomy, degree of autonomy. People don't like to be micromanagement. This is a trend that is evolving and increasing. Fairness, recognition, transparency in reward process, as I mentioned. Speak up freedom, involvement in decision making regarding the work employees carry out. Flexible working, supportive line management and HR initiatives such as performance management as a support activity. We will never stress this enough. So focus on this component in order to exploit, to reap the benefits of a total reward approach in defining and structuring, and of course, most of all, implementing our reward strategy. Again, there is no single recipe for an effective total reward. However, there are factors that should characterize this approach, and at its basis, total reward features are, first of all, total reward is a holistic, multi-phased process. So total reward facilitates the ability of organization in attracting, retaining, engaging talents, and this suggests us how holistic and complex is the total reward approach. That's why its implementation is kind of challenging for our organization. So we shouldn't forget that total reward aims to several advantages for organization, as I mentioned, attracting, retaining talent, and successful implementation of the business strategy. In doing so, total reward essentially makes use of intrinsic and extrinsic reward together. Therefore, from this, we immediately notice that it embraces a vast list of HR-related activities. Another fundamental aspect of total reward is the situational judgment and best fit approach. So total reward is designed and implemented based on peculiarity, uniqueness of every single business and its reality in terms of rivalry within the industry, market competitiveness, size of organization, culture. Therefore, this requires a high degree of customization and of programs and initiatives according to what? According to the peculiarity and the relevant aspects of organization, such as its culture, strategy, structure, anything determining the so-called configuration of organization, as well as, of course, business objectives. Therefore, situational judgment and best fit. Strategic. This is inherently embedded in the total reward concept. This is the main principle, is to align the reward strategy to the business strategy and the people point of view. So it must be people-centered. It recognizes the sustainable competitive advantage derives from focusing on what people value the most. And this is again reconnecting total reward to the centrality of working experience, employee working experience within the organization. Again, differentiator. So let's borrow in this marketing adjective. Total reward. This must be, kind of highlighted. Total reward is a tool that also acts as a differentiator within organization, differentiating organization from each other, and it should be exploited to create employee work experience. The employee work experience, in its turn, feeds into employer branding purposes. And this makes a difference between organization. Total reward at the end of the day is strictly connected with organization reputation. So that's why total reward as a differentiator. Total reward also as another aspect characterizing total reward is dynamic by definition and is long-term oriented. So total reward is a long-term and let's say almost a philosophical approach. Its implementation is not a sudden and kind of brutal, change within the workforce or within HR and generally speaking managerial practices. It must be approached as a continuing evolution that also mirrors workforce and business dynamics. So these are the main facets of total reward approach, a holistic process characterized by situational judgment and best fit, high level of customization, strategic. The strategic nature of total reward is embedded in the concept of total reward itself. Differentiator. Total reward allows organizations to differentiate themselves from other organizations. The way we pay people, intrinsically, extrinsically, financially, financially, makes a difference. Send outside messages about who we are, what we want to achieve. And dynamism and long-term orientation. These are the main characteristics of total reward approach in embedding this concept within our reward strategy. So let's go briefly through advantages and disadvantages in pros and cons in total reward. There are like in many, in every human resource and generally speaking, business management activities, there are positive and negative sides. So for sure, among the advantages we have attraction, retention, and people development and engagement. Talent development and engagement. Total reward allows to better interpreting these and achieving these objectives, as well as employer branding and differentiator, as we mentioned. Among the disadvantages, we have a difficulty in handling non-financial rewards. For instance, organizations, they feel much more confident and able in handling financial aspects in their total reward strategy rather than non-financial aspect. Another disadvantage is, for sure, it increases the managerial activities. So it absorbs resources, time consuming, and difficulty in proving the return on investment, especially when the degree of flexibility of benefit is so broad that it's hard to find direct link. Company resources, are often limited, and there are risk of pleasing part of the workforce whilst disappointing the other. This is the reason of the flexible nature of total rewards. So more or less, this is everything. Before the Q&A final session, I would like to thank you, first of all, and I'm always really, really honored and glad of sharing with you these topics and listening from your experience, sharing our own knowledge, which is the most important thing we can do. And thank you so much once again. And I invite you for the next appointment on the 21st May at 5 p.m. British Summer Time. We will discuss of HR analytics and well-being. So two important and current topic of human resource management nowadays. So let's stop sharing our screen. And what do you think about what we discussed? Is there something you want to add, something you want to share? We stressed quite a lot the concept of total reward and importance of non-financial reward. Is there something you want to highlight or share your own experience, for instance, in your company, whether you saw element mirroring what happens in your own company? Does your company adopt total reward, or do you feel your company may adopt a reward strategy like the one described earlier? Yes, sir. Any thought about it? Felix, Simon, Corey, Shria. What do you think about it? Is there any similarity, for instance, in your own company, the company you work for? Is there, or your experience, or generally speaking, your thought? Let's share a bit of our own experience. What do you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's me, Chrissy.
I can't see you.
Yeah.
I can hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
Yes,
Can you
yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Perfect, perfect. Yes, yes. Please go ahead. Thank you.
From my experience, I think where I work in the civil service, when you look at the reward system, the non-financial rewards, they look as if the top management, higher level, who are considered when it comes to the non-financial rewards.
Right.
Because bottom there, below the ladder, we mostly look at the financial rewards, and it's like once we progress, that is why all these things come in. And when you even look at our recruiting system and conditions of service and appointment letters, you see clearly that the non-financial rewards are reserved for those at the higher level. I don't think it's the best from what I've heard from you now. If you want to increase productivity in organization, I think you have to look at it holistically. You don't just have to, I think, I've just learned that from you today. But all along, I thought the non-financial reward is reserved for senior management and not for the junior staff. But I've just realized that if you want people to increase productivity, then the non-financial should be spread across board. And I think that's something I've learned today that I'm very happy about. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel this creates a sort of division, a sort of an invisible wall, almost, acting as a wall between managerial layers and operational? So is this something that also kind of highlight this, let me say, with no offense, kind of backward approach, top-down approach, manager from a side and employees, with this, top-down approach typical of organization of few decades ago. Now things are changing in terms of relationship that we have with our managers. Our manager, first of all, organizational became more flat, with less hierarchy, despite the hierarchy still in place, and needed somehow. But managers should be much more supportive. Managers should be less controlling, less manager and more leader. What do you think? So from your description, I also see that this kind of approach in reward management, namely allocating non-financial reward and incentives, bonuses only for managerial position, is kind of, really creates a double, kind of an organization within an organization. So in which employees are treated in a way and manager in another. This is,
that's very bad. Yeah, because I have an experience. For instance, when it even comes to training, should I say the juicy training? If you are not a senior manager, you don't travel abroad for training, which is bad.
all right.
So yeah, it's something that discrimination. I think from
here,
here,
affect the morale. And you know what? Today, I worked for many, different sector, from automotive, public procurement sector, in which I had more, HR experience within a very dynamic and high pressure raised environment, manufacturing sector, and I more and more, I consider that we, as HR manager, really we should abandon the idea of managing people.
yeah.
I think that sometimes I have to admit, sometimes, it's even to me describe myself as a HR manager, and using the word manager is something a bit awkward, that I don't really like, because I think management is he assumed over time this sense of control and top-down approach, when now this is really backward, and this is really what doesn't motivate people. This is about stimulating. Now is about HR is about stimulating people creativity, fostering people to explore and develop their unique inclination and orientation. This is to obtain the most from employee. It's not about giving a task and controlling that task gets done. This was the management side. This was the core of the managerial role, which is aligning people behavior to organizational standards and productivity and everything else. I think things now are changing, and especially for manager of a certain age, they risk to be kind of out of the rhythm in managing people of young generation. Because culturally, especially younger generation, the younger generation, they are not used to be managed. They want to be stimulated, promoted, and it's no longer about I am the manager, you are the employee, you do what I say. This is a, and can you see how reward manager impact and reflect organizational culture? Can you see, for instance, no financial reward and only manager working abroad? Can you see how is a mirror of the organizational culture, and how also work in terms of attraction or retention, because
Yeah.
this, for instance, is something that may create problem of retaining employee. And we never forget, this is something I always like to remember. It is really, really difficult that in an organization, I don't think, I'm kind of part of the managerial side of the organization, but I don't think there are organizations whereby if a manager doesn't show up at work, the organization doesn't go ahead. Instead, it's the opposite. It's when the operation, or when the employees, then
Yeah.
when the frontline employee doesn't show up to work, that the machine stops.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think this is something that we always need to remind ourselves in managing people. So, and again, thank you for sharing this. And it is a really, really plus in the civil service. So we see how dynamics in public service are different, and still, public service is kind of struggling in re-architecturing itself. Despite, we must say, I don't know how long have you been in the public sector, but I see that over time, let's see the past 10 years, there will be there is a strong, evolution of the public sector that it's kind of embracing many approaches that were typical of the private sector, in promoting people performance and in engaging employees and employee development. But again, there are still lots of different, and this pushes us in taking into consideration this difference, cultural difference, practice difference in implementing our activity, especially when, for instance, we want to promote that change. We have to consider our stakeholders and key stakeholders. And in public sector, our key stakeholders may be culturally, in many cases, for instance, kind of hostile toward certain changes, within the organization. So this is absolutely important, to take in consideration, and building our stakeholders, management activities in terms of aim for the aim of getting support from the key stakeholders. So thank you very much for this intervention. Really thoughtful and meaningful. Any other intervention? Someone else wants? Felix, please. You are welcome. Felix, I don't know if you raised accidentally your hands or you want to. Great.
Yes. No.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you.
I'm just thinking. I'm based in South Africa, and
Great.
here we have collective bargaining, which is a huge thing here. I don't know how that will affect the process of reward. Companies or organizations may just wait for the next collective bargaining meeting to be able to determine what they are going to pay their employees or offer their employees.
Right. Thank you, Felix, for this. And you put in the middle a kind of hot topic, and I predict prediction are the most difficult things, especially when it's about the future. Someone ironically says, I predict that. First of all, let me say, here in the UK, trade unions are at the lowest probably point in terms of popularity and power. So here we have a totally different situation between, we have a gig economy that is exploding, 0-hour contract that are going out of control sometimes. Yes, you perfectly know the reality of the UK labor market. This in a sense attract investors because our labor market is much more flexible rather in comparison with other countries. So in a certain sense is good. In another sense, it's no good for work practice and pushes risks to push the country backward, somehow backward. So I'm a strong supporter of trade union, but a new kind of trade union. new kind of trade union acting as a consultant, you know, in order to not to, you know, kind of slowing down process of the business and economic dynamics. So now trade unions should review their approach if they want to regain popularity. And I think that, Felix, you know, in your case in South Africa, if trade union, I don't know exactly the dynamics in South Africa, but for what you said, it seems to me that trade union, they still got kind of power and relevance. And I'm, you know, kind of glad to hearing that at least there is collective bargaining that allows to put forward and making people voice heard at some level. And I think that trade union, regardless now the kind of political and historical situation, they have been somehow important in any country, you know, therefore it is probably a good thing, you know, if trade union in your country, they are pushing toward reviewing the approach in managing people. Reward, essentially, it must be said that usually trade union act in favor of, let's say, basic elements. So they probably are stronger when there are huge disparity, discriminations. What do you think? What do you think, Felix?
Yes, I think because of the historical past of South Africa, so
yeah.
the trade unions, they're very strong, and also they work in collaboration with the political parties. So they are really pushing. The only challenge is that sometimes that may take performance away because the individual staff may rely a lot on
All
the
right.
trade union.
Let's say there is a tendency of instrumentalization of trade union power from the employees. So essentially threatening strikes and stuff, and employee and trade unions may have the tendency of kind of instrumentalize the power, having a negative effect on, you know, if you see the history of the UK in the 1970s, you know, there are similarity, and the other country, for instance, I have a experience in of Italian dynamics. I'm Italian, and likewise the South Africa. In Italy, we have a strong trade union, differently from the UK, have a strong power, and in Italy as well, there is this tendency, you know, of invoking trade union, despite their power is a bit in decline, has been declining in the last 5-10 years. But the in the public sector, for instance, the trade union power and influence is still massive, still important, and so a lot of similarity. And I do understand what you mean when profitability of organization is kind of hampered by kind of instrumentalization of trade union power. Yeah, this may happen, but you know what? We also must recognize that it's about stakeholders management. How we as a organizational leader or manager, senior manager, deal with our stakeholder. Trade union in a country with like South Africa or Italy, they are should be considered key stakeholders. So is the business strategy taking into consideration the trade union as a key stakeholders? I'm not a, you know, guru, considerable a guru of management. But for instance, I worked in a country that similarly to yours is, you know, shows the same dynamic. And the way I managed the trade union is simply transforming the relation in a conflictual relation, in a kind of joint venture. You know, I involved trade union in my initiative. I worked in a public procurement sector where I had to deal with redundancy of many employees and redesign and relocation of employees across a region. And a very dramatic moment, a very dramatic situation. I couldn't go through, I couldn't, you know, succeed in when we lost contracts, for instance, in the redundancy process, if I wasn't supported by trade union. And as a private organization, be supported from trade union, it means that you have to work together with trade union. You cannot, you know, wait for trade union be called by the employees. You have to bring trade unions around your table when you make your strategic decision. You have to be transparent, you know, with trade unions, showing them what are the scenarios, what is the reality. Also, and especially in order to avoid the instrumentalization from employees, because trade unions are called when things go wrong. And at that point, you know, they don't know anything. They just, you know, are called from employees when situation is already dramatic. And, you know, at that point, it's difficult to build a constructive relation. So planning in advance with trade union is fundamental, and you know, this is kind of recalled within stakeholder management. Therefore, in countries like yours, like also in order to shape our reward management and non-financial reward, consultation and involving trade unions where trade union, you know, are key and relevant stakeholders, it's fundamental. So our key is absolutely playing in advance, involving trade unions, inviting trade unions. When you call, sorry, there's a bit of sun at my back. When you invite trade union, taking